Okay, welcome there. This is TGM's Legal Nugget. So still on our landlord tenant series, we will be asking another question and then profiling solution to or an answer to the question, and so on and so forth. So the question that I've put up today is, or that I've fine-tuned from the list of questions that I've been getting, is many landlords increase rent suddenly. Is a landlord allowed to increase rent at will? Is your landlord allowed to increase rent at will? Now, your landlord is the owner of the property, right? He has every right to increase rent, right? But subject to some qualifications, right? And you must understand this qualification. Now, the first qualification is that the rent must only be increased at the expiration of the current or running rent, right? So if, for example, you rented an apartment and then 6 months into your rent, but of course, you understand you rented for a year, right? And 6 months into your rent, your landlord comes and say, oh, I'm going to increase rent. No, you cannot start paying that new rent. In fact, that new rent is unenforceable. The old rent must necessarily come to an end first before you then start paying the new rent, right? Then secondly, your landlord can only also increase rent where there is a tenancy agreement, and within the clauses of that tenancy agreement, there is a provision where rent can be reviewed periodically, right? So periodically, depending on the kind of tenancy arrangement that you have with your landlord, could be, say, monthly or biannually, or annually, or such other periods as may be agreed. Then again, your landlord, the third qualification is that your landlord cannot increase rent without the mutual consent of the parties, right? So take, for example, you've entered into a tenancy agreement with your landlord, right? And then in that tenancy agreement, it is agreed that it's going to be like for every 2 years or every 3 years, and so on and so forth. And then your landlord comes and say, oh, the economy is biting, I want to increase my rent, blah, 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 and all that. Now, by virtue of that agreement that has been entered, your landlord is stopped from increasing, the rent, right? So he must necessarily, by law, wait for the expiration of the term that is contained in the tenancy agreement for him to increase the rent. So he can't do that. But however, if you say, oh, landlord, I understand, okay, I'm going to consent, let us mutually agree. You said you want to increase by this time. Okay, why don't we just make it at XYZ time, and so on and so forth. So by that mutual agreement between the parties, the landlord can now successfully increase the rent.